Welcome to The Optimized Geek, a podcast full of secret knowledge that will enable you to reboot your life. Ready to improve your health, wealth, partner intimacy, peer group, spirit, career, business, and more? Then buckle up. Here's your host, Stephen Spencer, author, speaker, SEO expert, and a quintessential geek who has been through his own incredible transformation. You wouldn't even recognize him 5 years ago.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of The Optimized Geek. I'm your host, Stephen Spencer, and today I have with us Cheyene. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. So he is the CEO and chairman of Accelerated Intelligence, a brain nutrition startup. He's also the inventor of Herbal Ecstasy, which was a smart drug from a while back, and he started experimenting with creating smart drugs in his teens, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. I started when I was about 15, 16 years old.
Yeah, amazing. That's pretty incredible. You're also an award-winning filmmaker. You had a production company that produced a documentary about the Aztecs. Just an all-around interesting guy, a brain hacker, a biohacker, serial entrepreneur. You've done multiple startups. You've also done some high-level consulting to the pharmaceutical industry on smart drugs as well, I believe.
Correct.
So you've been in this world for a long time, for many years, experimenting with different supplements and herbs and so forth. As you said, you started Herbal Ecstasy at 15 years old. How did that occur? How did you end up becoming a brain hacker as a teenager?
I started when I was about 15, 16 years old and started this company called Herbal Ecstasy. And we created the first real mainstream smart pill. And Herbal Ecstasy grew in popularity so much that by the time I was 16, the company was earning about $350 million a year in revenue. We were probably the largest supplement company around at the time. And the products got out. They spread all over the world. And, we were in the club scene, we were in the party scene, we were in the rave scene, but we were also in places like GNC and 7-Eleven and Urban Outfitters. And we really managed to penetrate the mainstream with what was a very potent nootropic at the time. Wow,
that's amazing. And so you had this $350 million a year business as a teenager. Were you running this, or were you? Did you bring in a CEO? How did you end up exiting and moving on? And
this was before Al Gore invented the internet. And so, we had no websites or anything like that. I had close to about 200 employees. We were all over the world. We had offices in all different kinds of countries. And I moved on from it. I exited it sometime in the late 90s, partially speaking. And, always kept a foot in it and, a very close eye on it. But I moved on to other things. I subsequently invented this thing called the vaporizer, which I think a lot of listeners might be familiar with, and started a vaporizer company called Vapeur, which went public recently. So they just had an IPO. I haven't really been watching the stock, but I think they're the first vaporizer company, not e-cig company, to go public, and really proud to see that. And, subsequent to that, I, just continued along doing close to about 200 different products and consulting for big pharma companies when they want to build their smart products and inhalation-driven products. And, I've just been sort of keeping up in that way, yeah.
That's quite a storied history you got there. That's amazing. Define for our listeners, what is a smart drug? Because it's not a drug in the recreational drug sort of sense, and it's not a prescription medication either. It's an enhancement tool. Maybe you could just define for our listeners what this means, smart drug.
Yeah, that's a good question. So in our field, we call it nutraceuticals, which is sort of the intersection between pharmaceuticals and natural supplements. And, although smart drugs can refer to sort of a broader category of what we call nootropics, which are substances that can help protect the brain and prevent neural degeneration, but also can stimulate the brain and help improve memory, focus, concentration, and alertness. That's what our area of focus is. And that's, if we're referring to them as smart pills or smart drugs, I don't like to use the term drugs. That's pretty much the area that we're talking about.
Exactly right. So just the uninitiated may be familiar with the movie Limitless as the really only exposure to nootropics. What is the reality versus the fiction of a limitless sort of drug?
So there's nothing that I've seen, and I've been around for a while and looked into and researched both pharmaceutical drugs, nutraceuticals, supplements, natural herbs, things you inhale, things that are injectable, things that you snort, things that you do all kinds of different ways, liquid, solid substances. There really is no, quote-unquote philosopher's stone when it comes to nootropics. There's nothing that you can take and will give you immediate superhuman powers without any recourse. And there are things that can do what the limitless pill does better than the limitless pill. Because if you remember in that film, his superpowers came with all types of side effects. And so that's in some ways the reality with harsher pharma drugs, that we can go into later. But, drugs all have fairly serious side effects. So what we look at is, okay, if there's something that can improve my brain and subsequently improve my body, what are the benefits and what are the risks? And how do the benefits outweigh the risks? Really, that's what we look at. And with pharma drugs across the board, even though they might work for some people to some extent, most people do end up having to pay the price, if not now, somewhere down the line. With supplements and nutraceuticals and products that are more natural and not synthesized in a lab in the same way that pharma drugs are, we can sort of avert a lot of those, heavy side effects, liver damage, all those things that come with the pharma drugs, and still maintain a pretty good overall ability to, incrementally increase our cognition, memory, focus, concentration, alertness, and overall well-being.
What are your thoughts around brain octane, the coconut oils, and the different sort of supplements and things that Bulletproof provides versus something that's more in a pill form, such as what you offer through your company, Accelerol? I just got back from a trip, so I haven't started taking this, but thank you for hooking me up with a free month's supply here. I'm going to give it a go. I hear good things, so I'm excited to try it out. So how does something like a fish oil supplement or a coconut oil compare and contrast, or how do these kind of dovetail into each other? Do you want to take both? Do you want to do like a bulletproof coffee sort of thing in the morning? Do you want to not worry about that and just take the Accelerol or something similar in a pill form?
Yeah, so these are great questions. Okay, so first I can address the bulletproof coffee question. For your listeners who might not know what it is a mixture of coffee and fatty oils, highly concentrated fatty oils, usually derived from coconut or from butter, milk fat, animal fats. And the fat helps prolong the effects of the caffeine. And so there's a lot of different types of that kind of coffee out there, and a lot of people are swearing by it. It goes as a testament to caffeine as a stimulant, which is probably one of the most popular stimulants out there, one of the most popular nootropics out there that most people take, is caffeine. The thing that we're learning about caffeine now, and something I talk to people about often, is that the body does build a tolerance to it. And for most people, I believe in my opinion, it's more important when you take your caffeine and what you take it with than if you're using fats to carry it through the body and prolong the effects of it. And the reason is all the research that we've done up until this point about nootropics brings up one very important topic, and it's cortisol. Cortisol is a degenerative hormone. It's a stress hormone that the body releases, and it's really a fantastic thing when you're going through something called fight or flight. If you're running from a lion, tiger, or bear, pick your favorite animal, and you have to get out of there, cortisol kicks up in your body, all the blood flow moves to the areas where it needs to move to, and you are running like a bat out of hell. And that's great. Cortisol is great for that. And then, when you're at safety, it comes down. The problem is in our modern day lives, we are constantly at stress. And cortisol is a neurodegenerative hormone. And what that means is that it actually degrades your brain function rather rapidly. So having caffeine, be it bulletproof or any other kind of caffeine, at times where you've got high cortisol release in the body, not only builds up an immunity, but increases the ravaging effects, the neurodegenerative effects of cortisol on the body. So what we recommend is the times that you take your caffeine are essential. Most people take it early in the morning, and that's a really tough habit for people to break. But cortisol, from most of the recent studies, has been shown to be at its highest in the morning. And that's one of the main reasons why people build up a tolerance. So most people who drink, multiple cups of coffee during the day, starting out first thing in the morning, will notice that their effects from the coffee actually doesn't last very long, and they're just doing it to maintain a level. Now, this is one of the main reasons why, I'm bringing to your second question, we developed Accelerol. Accelerol contains caffeine, and Accelerol, for your listeners, I imagine they can go to your site and you can give them a link to it, spelled EXCELEROL.com. That's the website. But Accelerol is a combination of different types of caffeine. Now, it's also combined with an ingredient called L-theanine. And L-theanine is what's found in green tea, and it's the ingredient that creates a sense of well-being. Now, the interesting thing about L-theanine is that it actually lowers cortisol levels, or it's known to lower cortisol levels. So combining that with your caffeine and taking it in the right time and in mixture with the other ingredients that are in Accelerol actually produce quite a different array of effects, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term, as compared to just having caffeine intake or combining fats with your caffeine to prolong the effects.
Right. So you mentioned L-theanine. Are there other amino acids that would also be either protective of your brain or performance enhancing? So
as far as amino acids go, yes. There are a lot of amino acids out there, and I think amino acids actually are some of the most promising things out there. Certain ingredients, particularly in the amino acid families, have shown a lot of promise in recent years, and we do include a lot of those in Accelerol. And that's one of the things that there's so many really great amino acids. And, this is one of the areas, Stephen, that I tell people often is, it's true, my company makes brain pills, what I think is the best brain pill out there. But, there's so much stuff out there. People end up taking, we've got a mutual friend who takes 30 or 40 pills a day. And, we saw him up on stage, talking about it. And it's overall very confusing to people. So what they'll do is they'll go out and they'll look at research on one thing and they'll buy it and they'll be like, oh my God, look at the research on this other thing. And the next thing they know, they've got 20 supplements. They don't really know. They've bits and pieced it together, and they're taking all these pills and not necessarily getting all the benefits that they could if they would take a single supplement. And this is why Accelerol, we feel, is so powerful, because all the ingredients are researched by medical doctors. We've got close to about 1,200 doctors around the world who recommend the product and who've looked into it and researched it. And, it's a very simple thing to do. You take one pill 3 times a day and you are done.
Right. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't also take, for example, coconut oil or brain octane or something like that, because you're not getting all the oils from the pill. And oils from like fish oil, from coconut oil is also a brain protectant, correct?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So what else do you need, right? So the nootropic, I think, in my opinion, I think Accelerol is a one-stop shop for nootropics. I think it's all you need as far as nootropics go. If you have other, sort of specific health conditions, then, you might be taking other supplements for that. But in a general person, in a person in generally good health who's wondering what else they need to take, my suggestion is this. I always feel that a whole foods diet and getting your nutrients from whole foods, natural, clean foods, as clean as possible, lean meat, lean protein, low on the refined carbs, cutting out the trans fats, but, vegetables, fruits, meats, animal products, those types of things, you can get most of the nutrients you need. Now, if you're vegetarian or vegan, which I was for many years and I think is an alarming fad that's happening now, then you do need to take other things to supplement. With that said, there are two things, and you hit one right on the nose. Fish oils, somewhat difficult to get unless you eat a lot of a certain kind of food. Although you can get a good amount, eating a fresh salmon or fresh lake fish. But fish oils are very important, and that's a very easy pill to get. You can order a big brand, something reliable and trustable, and use it. And the second thing that I recommend is probiotics. And a good probiotic that can help the gut microbiome, which we're learning more and more now is directly related to brain function, is really good too. But you can also get that from whole foods like yogurt, kefir, and fermented vegetables, fermented coconut water. There's no specific need to take a pill all the time for that.
Yeah, so I personally haven't been taking probiotics, but I've been thinking maybe I should start. I don't usually eat yogurt. I'm probably low on the probiotics. And also, speaking of your gut biome, I think it's a good idea to get your gut biome tested to see kind of what the health is of that gut bacteria. There are services like uBiome. I just signed up with them. Any other services or resources that you would recommend to kind of check on your health, your various levels, kind of the quantified self sort of movement?
So a great company that is launching shortly is called Vitagene. And Vitagene basically does just that. They check your DNA and they make supplement suggestions based on your DNA. And this is a company that's going to be launching, I think, fairly soon. And their website is myvitagene.com. So myvitagene.com. And that would be one that I would recommend. I know it's got very, very high-profile advisory board, very high-profile science that went into building this. So that's an awesome company for if you want to do genetic testing.
Right. And I did genetic testing a while back when 23andMe still was allowed by the FDA to give health reporting. So what would be the actions that you might take from doing a genetic test? Let's say that, I don't know, you have a family history of Alzheimer's disease, for example, or of some rare form of cancer. Maybe there it's kind of obvious that there are certain genes involved with that certain disease. But in general, what do you do with this big, long report that comes from your genetics test? Do you get it read by a doctor, a geneticist? Do you try and figure out yourself? Do you go online and run it through some sort of tool?
No, so these guys, the Vitagene guys, what they're doing, and I've had long talks with them. I'm currently on their advisory board. Those guys actually have doctors on staff that will look at your results that I think are done by one of the big genetics companies And so you go online, you order your kit, you get your kit, you send in your swab, and they get the results back, and they analyze it. You get a consult with the doctor, and then the doctor will tell you what you should do based on your genetics. That's the whole thing that they're doing that I thought was pretty cool. So in that way, it's pretty awesome. But the bigger answer is, I'm not qualified to really go too much into this, but there is a lot of genetic science that's coming out that talks about editing DNA. And a new technology, a new upcoming technology that scientists are over the moon about is this thing called CRISPR. Have you heard of this?
I have. I don't know a lot about it. I actually have a degree in biochemistry, master's. I was studying for PhD before I started getting into internet marketing, and then I dropped out. So it's been a while. I don't really keep up. Yeah, I've heard of it.
So, basically from a highly uneducated layman, explaining a very highly specific scientific method, it involves editing our DNA to the point where we can target, genes that cause autism, genes that cause prostate cancer. We can create all these things. And this technology, the exciting thing about it is that it's not 5 years away. This is 2 years away. This isn't even, this isn't 3 years away. This is 2 years away. In 2 years, we're going to be having the fully harnessed abilities to do these things, and we're going to have harnessed the abilities to do these things, I should say. And it's very, very promising, and it's this kind of science seems to be really growing and expanding exponentially, and it's very promising. So I think anybody that's got any serious health conditions, if you could just hang on for like 2 years, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be able to take care of most things. If you can hang on 5 years, then you're going to be in good shape. If you can hang on for 10 years, I couldn't imagine anything that they wouldn't be able to address.
Yeah, we'll all be robots by then. So you mentioned autism. It seems like this is becoming an epidemic. It's really taking over our country, as is Alzheimer's. These two diseases just seem to be running rampant through our population. Are there some sort of environmental factors, do you think, here that are triggering this? Is it more a kind of a perfect storm of genetics plus environment? What do you think is happening here, and what is somebody to do who is somehow touched by either of these two diseases? Perhaps, like for a listener, they might have a mom or a dad who is starting to get Alzheimer's. What would you recommend?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, that's a really tough one. I think we talked about autism, and then we moved on to Alzheimer's. So, well, completely separate things, but all having to do with brain neurology. What we're learning more and more about the brain these days is that it's plastic. And what I mean by that is a fantastic book, if I can go on a tangent, by this guy, Norman Dodge, called The Brain That Changes Itself. He's a neuroscientist that wrote this game-changing book that talks about how, we used to believe that our brains were sort of hardwired to be rigid. And in time, what we've learned is that you can lose more or less 50% of your brain, like your physical brain mass, and still be a normal functioning human being. And the reason is because the brain is an adaptive organ, and it actually adapts. And a lot of this has to do with sort of the infrastructure of the brain and how we're wired. And he goes into detail on that in his book. And in my book, The Brain That Changes Everything, I also go into that. You can get a free copy of that on Amazon or Smashwords, or I think it might be like $1. But and you can read up on that. But what we're learning also is that there's certain nutrients that the deficiency of hasn't been proven causes these diseases, but the addition to may really help support people who have these conditions. Caffeine in particular seems to be very promising for Parkinson's and early onset Alzheimer's. Now, again, one thing that I talk about often is the importance of the source of the caffeine. Not all caffeine is created equal, and not taking it at the right time and not taking the right kind could lead to having no benefit. Now, caffeine from tea, because it's mixed with things like L-theanine, tends to be much higher quality and have much more beneficial effects in the human body for people with these types of conditions. And so just anecdotally, we've had a lot of research with Acceleral and people who have brain conditions who swear by it. And we've had a lot of people who've bought it for their grandfathers, their fathers, elderly people, people who have things like ADD, ADHD, and they've been seeing really great results. Being a supplement in the United States, we are not allowed to make any claims about our products. We can't say that it treats, prevents, cures, or diagnoses any disease. So we don't say that, and we let people pretty much try the product themselves and come to their own conclusions about what it does for them. And really, I at the end of the day, always come back to the science of things. There's a lot of woo-woo out there, and there's a lot of bad science and a lot of people who really just want your money and are willing to sell you anything. But if you look into products and you see something that you think might be promising, the only way to find out if it's going to work for you, oftentimes, is to try it. And if you do your research, if you research the ingredients, you're getting it from a trusted company, and you feel good about the product, and you take it and you start seeing results, then I can't say that anybody can argue with that.
Right. So a little while ago, you were saying that it's important to not overdo it in terms of the caffeine, because if you take it regularly at the wrong time and you don't take a break from it, you lose the benefits of it. So you cycle your caffeine in a particular way. Could you describe how you cycle caffeine, how you cycle, maybe if Acceleral is something that you cycle as well, how does that work? What do you recommend for cycling regimen?
So caffeine is really one of those things that works better when it's cycled. Like we talked about, taking it at the wrong times can lead to no benefits, and worse yet, can lead to having a tolerance to it, which means that it'll have no effect on you. So what I recommend to people is very simple. Play with cycling your product. Even with Acceleral, you want to try to cycle it. So take it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks on. Initially, when you take it, start with a month on, taking it at different times to see which time works better for you. And then take a week off, and then start again. Then break it up. Take a couple days off, couple days on, couple days off, couple days on. And you can just play with that. There's no hard, fast systems for what works best, what works worse, what works on who. We're all so individualized. And even if I were to give you an exact specific formula, it would be different for everybody. So we can leave it at, people can just try what they can and see how well it works for them.
Let's talk for a moment about adrenal fatigue, because this is a big problem with a number of people. They're getting too much stress. They're stimulating their body with too many bad stimulants and just not taking care of their bodies, and their adrenals are just taking a huge hit. How big of an issue is this? How does one address it, ameliorate it, and just in general avoid it?
So as far as adrenal fatigue goes, again, the cycling is a big part of that. So if what you're doing is you are cycling your nootropics and you're cycling your caffeine, that helps a lot. Then there's two other factors that I tell everybody about. And, people don't really want to hear about that. They're like, yeah. But it is essential. There was a fantastic book written a while ago called Spark and it talks about the effects of exercise on the brain. And interestingly enough, one of the things they discovered in just one small group, women over the age of 30, they found that exercise alone is more effective. This is shocking statistics. This is a scientific study, controlled, double-blind, placebo-controlled study, that exercise is far more effective than pharmaceutically approved drugs on women for depression. So now if you can imagine that if all women across the board exercise, instead of taking the pharmaceutical drugs, and there's a protocol to the exercise of how much you have to do, you have to get your heart rate up, actually break a sweat. It has to be done for hard, aggressive exercise for short bursts of time. You could actually do without pharmaceutical drugs for that one particular condition. Now, the two areas that I tell people, number one, of course, is exercise, and number two is going to be diet. Diet is essential. Getting plenty of whole foods, reducing your carb intake, which has the capacity to increase cortisol levels, reducing your intake of refined sugars and processed foods, eliminating or reducing nitrates from your diet. These are all things that you can do, increasing the amount of fermented foods in your diet, eating more whole foods like eggs, which is an amazing superfood. Have eggs every day. You're getting your omega-3s, you're getting your protein, you're getting so many vitamins and nutrients from that. And just good, clean eating and aggressive exercise daily, and cycling, and and by cycling I don't mean bicycling, although that's a good exercise as well, but cycling your nootropics and taking the right nootropics. I think that's going to be really the simplest way to reduce the potentials of any type of degradation caused by adrenal fatigue or even neural degeneration. And that's really what we do, at Accelerated Intelligence, is that, we realize that, in the last 36 minutes that we've been talking, both of us have lost a large number of brain cells. And the interesting thing is we are continuing to lose them as we speak. And so the process, the thought behind that is really two-tiered. One is, how do we stop that? How do we stop that degradation? And two is, how do we improve our brain as it exists? So one is trying to slow the neural degeneration, and two is, how do we actually improve and increase and stimulate our brain to be optimized in the best way possible without causing damage to our body, our brain, and taking all kinds of weird stuff that will grow horns and cause 12 kinds of cancer,
How do you get into a flow state, and what do you do to maximize that flow state, other than, of course, you're taking the nootropics, the Acceleral, you're exercising, you're doing these things we've been talking about, but many folks don't understand the power of flow and what that exactly means, because a person in a flow state can accomplish a week's worth of work in one day if they stay in that flow state for that entire day. So what is the secret behind flow and getting into it and staying there?
So that's a really good question. I guess the best way I can answer that is, I guess personally for me, I realized a while ago that we all have the same amount of hours in a day. No matter who you are, that's the one thing that's constant, is that you have the same hours as Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, well, maybe not Steve Jobs anymore, but Bill Gates or anybody out there has the same hours as you. So our hours are equal. The amount of optimized hours is I think what differs. I realized also that during the day, during an average work day, even though I might have a full 8 hours, 10 hours, however long it is that I'm working, only a very small amount of those hours are usable in what you're calling the flow state, where I'm at my best and able to produce the best work. So in the hours that I am not at my best, I tend to focus those hours on actually doing physical tasks, running my errands. If there's anything that requires my actual physical presence there to do it, that's when I'm doing it. And I take the hours where I am at my best, which is usually after a light meditation or a light nap. It's never right after a meal. And I optimize those. And the way I optimize them is, about 45 minutes before, I take an Accelerol capsule. I usually do that maybe about an hour after my lunch. I'll take about a 10, 15-minute nap. And then when I awake from the nap, I am, the Accelerol's kicking in. I'm usually at my best. And I can have a little bit of matcha tea and, power through. And I can get done more in the next 2 hours, even in the next 60 minutes, than most people can in 8 hours of mixed efficiency.
Right. So matcha, I don't think I've had matcha before. For those of you who haven't heard of it, why include that?
Oh, you're going to love this. So matcha is actually an amazing alternative to coffee for anybody who's looking to get into that, or if you're thinking about doing the bulletproof thing. You can make a bulletproof matcha and avoid some of the adrenal fatigue or jitteriness that might come from coffee. Matcha is a type of green tea, originally from China, then moved on to Japan. And it currently, our company, full disclosure, we are the largest producer of matcha tea in the country. So I say this partly out of self-interest, but other part out of just sheer passion for matcha and how much I love it and it every day. Matcha is a shade-grown and hand-processed powdered green tea. And the difference between matcha and regular tea, and why matcha can be up to 10 times more effective than a regular cup of tea, is that with matcha, you're actually drinking the powder. And in the powder lies 10 times or more of the nutrients of the tea. With a regular tea, you just steep the leaves and you throw them out, getting a reduced benefit and efficiency from it. Matcha is also one of the highest non-processed substances for L-theanine and a whole bunch of other nutrients. And I've got a book out on that called Matcha Green Tea Superfood, which is also available if you just look my name up under Amazon. You'll find it, and also under Smashwords, which really goes into the science of this stuff. But it's amazing. It's very affordable and can be purchased online, and really, can be had cold. You can have it hot. You can mix it in foods. You can bake with it. And it's really one of these things that, once you incorporate it into your life, you will see a marked benefit for sure. So
let's wrap this up for everybody, all of our listeners. What would be the 1, 2, or 3 most important things, takeaways, or next actions for our listeners to take to improve their brain health and performance? I know it's a kind of a summary type of question, but if you could just make a very simple little checklist, like these are the 3 things that you must do if you care about your brain.
Sure, that makes sense. So, I think it's very simple. What I'd like to say is everybody go ahead and order Accelerol, and it's a one-step process, but unfortunately that's not the case. So it's a 3-step process. One is that you have to really take a look at your supplementation regime. Again, I recommend just a 1-pill solution for you. So be it Accelerol or be it another product that you're fond of, go with that. I recommend liquid capsules because the delivery method is in a way superior to powders. And I recommend, possibly taking a fish oil and a probiotic. And that's really all you need as far as supplements go. So, by the way, if for any of your listeners, they are interested in trying Accelerol and they mention the Wise Geek, we'll go ahead and throw in the first month of Accelerol for free. And there's absolutely no obligation to continue. They can cancel at any time if they like to. So I thought I'd put that out there for you. And then the second area will be exercise. If you can afford it, get a trainer. Personal trainers worth every cent of what you pay them, seriously. Outside of that, if not, you do need to get on some kind of exercise regime. So you need to do some kind of exercise that you can do daily, every single day, and really see the benefits from that. And outside of that, the third step is really going to be getting on a diet. Now, if you have a trainer, you can talk to them if they're intelligent about, sort of paleo way of life, if they understand sort of nutrients that will affect the brain. They should be able to put together a fairly good program for you that will address most of that stuff. If they don't, a little bit of reading into nutrition and diet can really make a big difference. And there's a lot of great books out there that go over that stuff. So I recommend that. Norman Dodge's book, The Brain That Changes Itself, talks about that. You can find a lot of tips on that in my book, The Brain That Changes Everything. There's a recent book out by another doctor called Brain Maker. It's the guy that wrote Grain Brain, I think was the name of the book. And that also will have some pretty good tips for you. So I think that would be it. Get your Accelerol, nutrition, diet, and exercise.
Great. Well, that was a very generous offer to our listeners to do the first month for them. And again, for those of you who are interested in taking Shaahin up on his offer, the website is Accelerol.com, EXCELEROL.com, and just mention the Optimized Geek, and you'll be able to get the first month for free. So with that, I again thank you, Shaahin, for taking this valuable time to talk to my listeners and impart your wisdom. For those of you listening, please take some action and take care of your brain, because it's the only brain you're going to get. And the time to start is not when you're starting to see some symptoms of lower or poor cognition. It's something that you need to be protective of from day one. So again, thank you, Shaahin. Thank you, listeners, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to The Optimized Geek. Your host has been Stephan Spencer, whose own transformation is chronicled in the upcoming book of the same title. Stephan is a 3-time author, professional speaker, and leading expert on SEO and online marketing. Remember, true happiness comes as a result not of outside circumstances, but of your own actions and attitudes. Life happens for us, not to us. Subscribe for groundbreaking insights, inspiration, strategies, technologies, and distinctions that will facilitate your own personal transformation. Simply visit www.optimizedgeek.com and please review us on iTunes. Until next time.